Well, I think you just add to that this weekend that you say, okay, the Raiders are 2-0, and now they have a short week Sunday game across the country against the Patriots. And the Patriots are, look, I know that the Patriots gave up 35 in Seattle on Sunday night. But that defense, if I am John Gruden and I'm watching tape, I am looking and seeing how much pressure they got on Russell Wilson for 4 quarters. And the reason that Seattle put up 35 is that Russell Wilson is one of the best players in NFL history, not just today, in NFL history, at throwing the ball accurately downfield under pressure. That is what they're going to need this week. If they win this game, John Gruden is going to need Derek Carr to make 2 or 3 with Lawrence Guy or Chase Winovich or a Devin McCourty, a safety blitzing. He's going to have to make some of those plays for the Raiders to win. That to me is a really fascinating matchup, just because on the surface you say, wow, Raiders, got a great chance going into New England. And I agree, they got a really good chance going into New England. But what would scare me is just the simple fact that Derek Carr is going to have to make big plays with people in his face.
Well, that's right. And the question is, Peter, will he throw it down the field when the opportunity is there? That's one of the criticisms that Chris Sims circles back to from time to time. He'll have the shot. He won't take it. And Chris knows from experience, specifically the experience of playing for John Gruden, he wants you to take those shots when they're there. And he wants you to know the difference between when they're there and when they're not there. And, when you look at the Seattle-New England game, the shots could be there because they were there for Seattle. But I think it's going to be even more dangerous, and it may make Carr even more hesitant because he's going to know Stephon Gilmore is going to want to make up for a bad showing against DK Metcalf. So Derek Carr is going to really have to push himself to just cut it loose. And I think the mindset for this game is, we got nothing to lose. We're 2-0. That's money in the bank. No one expects us to go to New England and win this game. Let's go out and let's try to take it. And that's what, Gruden can show him the film over and over again of Russell Wilson. This is what you have to do to beat the Patriots. Dink and dunk is not going to beat the Patriots. You got to take your shots when you have your shots, and it's up to you to know when you have that opportunity and not hesitate and get rid of the football and hope for the best.
Mike, there's one other game this weekend that no one is going to call the game of the weekend. In fact, it's a matchup of 2-0-2 teams. But to me, one of the fascinating matchups this weekend is a beat-up mentally and physically Philadelphia Eagles team hosting Joe Burrow and the Bengals, because we saw last week, Joe Burrow, these are not your father's Bengals. These are not the David Klingler Bengals. They're not even the Andy Dalton Bengals, in my opinion. This is an explosive offense that's going to come into Philadelphia. And Philadelphia certainly doesn't look explosive on the other side. I mean, no Jalen Reagor this weekend. Probably, I don't know about Alshon Jeffrey, but obviously he hasn't played yet this year. You don't know what you're going to get. And so I kind of look at this game, and plus everybody is piling on with Carson Wentz, and rightfully so. He has not played well. You look on the surface, the Eagles have to win this game. They absolutely, unequivocally have to. But you know what? Joe Burrow doesn't give a blank about what the Philadelphia Eagles need. He's gone into Tuscaloosa and whacked the Crimson Tide. So going into Philadelphia with no fans, I doubt is going to scare him very much.
But, Peter, that's the mentality that Joe Burrow has that will serve him well throughout his career. And that's the mentality Derek Carr needs. Because, to me, this is his opportunity. This is his year. This is it. John Gruden keeps seeing these young quarterbacks come into the NFL, and they've got the skills, they've got the mindset, they've got the moxie, they've got everything. And eventually he's going to say, I need one of those guys. If my guy won't play like these young guys who maybe don't know any better to be more hesitant about cutting it loose, I'm going to go get one of these young guys, and we're going to push Derek Carr down the road to wherever it is that he goes next in his career, and that's just the reality. So there is a connection because Joe Burrow would throw the ball down the field against the New England Patriots. And Derek Carr, this is his chance to show that he's willing to roll the dice, that he's willing to throw an interception if that's what happens, that he's willing to take the chance, because that's the only way you're going to beat the Patriots, if you go out there and take the chance. A couple of injury notes from that game that are going to be potentially impactful as it relates to the Raiders' offense. Darren Waller, tight end, didn't practice Thursday. He had 12 catches against the Saints on Monday night. And Josh Jacobs, who was a battering ram for the Raiders, especially in the second half, keeping the Saints offense off the field, he didn't practice either. So if either of both of those guys aren't available, Peter, it becomes a lot harder to take care of the meat and potatoes stuff that allows you to set up those shots down the field.
Yeah, and look, Derek Carr is such an interesting test case, basically, for John Gruden in his career, because I think he really wants Derek Carr to work. But then what happens is John Gruden goes and works out Kyler Murray personally in Texas, a year ago. And I never forget at the Combine a year ago when we didn't really know what the Raiders were going to do. And one of the coaches who I know, who knows Gruden well, said, "You realize John Gruden's favorite quarterback?" I said, "Who?" He goes, "The one he doesn't have." And so those are the kind of things that if you're Derek Carr, you just have to be conscious of it. You can't let it rule your life, because then you're not going to be able to perform. But you have to understand that every week you step into John Gruden's test kitchen.
That's something Sims has said over and over again. John Gruden is a quarterback hoarder. Now, Sims, unfortunately, says it a different way, and he thinks that's the right term. And I've had to tell him it's hoarder, Chris. There's a der that has to go to the end of that. But, yeah, it's always that wandering eye. It's always that fascination. And Chris has been that guy who, I thought I was your starter, and Gruden's always looking around. He always wants to upgrade at quarterback, and I think this is the year that he will if he doesn't get what he wants out of Derek Carr. All right, one of the guys that I'm sure John Gruden would love to have are the two quarterbacks playing on Sunday in Seattle, Dak Prescott or Russell Wilson. Either one, yes, thank you very much. I would take them if I'm John Gruden. This one has the potential, Peter, to be just, an NBA-style game from a scoring standpoint, because the defenses haven't shown they can put the clamps on anyone, and the offenses have shown they can't be clamped.
And I think that's going to be the way this game is going to be played. I was telling somebody in Dallas yesterday that I said, I don't bet on football. I don't bet on anything. But if I bet on anything this year in the NFL, I said, I don't even know what the over is in this game, but I would bet the over unless it's like 75 points. And so that's what I think you're going to see, because that's how each of these teams right now, while the respective defenses are settling in, that's how they have to play. And here's the one other thing. So the Dallas Cowboys have got to get more pressure from that defensive front. That's why they brought in Everson Griffin. That's why they brought in Aldon Smith. First week of the season, they got great pressure. They need to get more pressure consistently from that front, because you've got to understand, after you lose Byron Jones, their secondary is very much a work in progress. Their front really has to help them, especially against a quarterback like Russell Wilson, who is just totally not intimidated by anything. So he's going to make his plays downfield. You've got to do everything you can to try to sack him 5 or 6 times.
The best way to slow down a high-powered offense is to keep it off the field. Cowboys coach Mike McCarthy told reporters yesterday they won't go into slow it down mode to try to limit the number of opportunities that Russell Wilson may have. And I don't know how I feel about that, because you have a guy you have a guy in Ezekiel Elliott. You can grind it out with him. Just even if your play calling doesn't change, just the awareness of when the clock is running, taking the full 40 seconds before you snap the ball the next time. That to me seems to be a prudent way to deal with Russell Wilson. But I think that at one level, McCarthy doesn't want to concede that his offense isn't every bit as good as Seattle's, and it's going to be whoever has the ball last type of a games where, it's going to be close right down to the wire, and we'll see who makes the last shot.
Mike, look, you can be a coach and you have to say that. You have to say it because you want your players to know that you are all in with them. So that's totally understandable. But then, I would bet, and again, let's see what happens. I would bet that Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys, Kellen Moore, I bet they call fewer out routes, corner routes than they normally might in the course of a game. And they call more crossers, more curls, more intermediate stuff over the middle of the field because they want to keep the clock running. And you have to be cognizant of that against Russell Wilson. If the Cowboys give Russell Wilson 8 possessions, they got a really good chance in this game. If they give him 11 possessions, I think it's Seattle's game.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game, potentially. And you've got 2 of the MVP candidates. Right now, Russell Wilson is the favorite after a couple of weeks. He said yesterday he doesn't just want an MVP vote. He wants the MVP. He may get all 50 votes by the time it's said and done this year if he keeps it up. But Dak Prescott is in the conversation as well. And, Peter, we spend the season talking about the MVP candidates because people are intrigued by it. They're fascinated by it. The reality is, at the end of the day, when the season is over and we know the 2 number 1 seeds in each conference, and especially now that the 1 seed means more than ever before because only the 1 seed gets a bye, it's going to be the quarterback of one of the 1 seeds. Unless the quarterback is just a bystander. That's going to be the key. Unless there is a ridiculously over-the-top record-setting type of a performance from another quarterback, it's going to be the quarterback of one of the 1 seeds because that seems to be the default choice. That
it is, Mike, but I'm gonna disagree with you on that, okay? Because my feeling is that let's just say that the way this season gets played, that we look at the NFC West as maybe the best division of the last 10 years, and who knows what's going to happen? But right now it's 7-1. And, if you had to pick a team that today, this moment, is the worst team in the division, as nutty as it sounds, it's the 49ers, because they're playing Nick Mullins and all this. But I guess the point I'm making is, if the Seahawks are, let's say, the 3rd seed after a total civil war of a year in the NFC West, and Russell Wilson, for the first time in his life, has thrown for 5,000 yards, and he's thrown 38 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. And, he's brought the Seahawks to a 2-game margin in the toughest division that we've seen in years in the NFL. That's going to hold some sway with me. And I understand exactly what you're saying, but I think the more I look at the MVP voting over the years, yes, the top seed teams, the top couple of seeds, they have a huge advantage when it comes to the MVP vote. No question about it. But I also think that you have to look at every factor. And this year, one of the factors is going to be the Armageddon schedules that teams like the Seahawks face.
But here's the thing, too, to get back to the point we were making last hour about that spin of the wheel that determines half of your schedule every year. The 4 NFC West teams play the 4 AFC East teams and the 4 NFC East teams. And that's one of the things that Sims and I put a flag in the ground over in the offseason, and I see others are starting to warm up to this possibility. With 3 wild card spots available, there's a chance all 4 of those teams of the NFC West will go to the postseason this year, which would be unbelievable if it happened. It's the kind of thing I love to root for because it's such a crazy outcome. But right now, when you look at the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place teams in that division versus the other 3, top to bottom, they're the best.
Yeah, the biggest problem is that they're going to spend so much time knocking each other off. And then in an easier division, let's say in the NFC South, if Tampa Bay gets its act together and wins 10 games, look, I could be wrong, Mike. I don't think 4 teams in the NFC West are winning 10 games. But I do
about
think
this, though.
that it. Go ahead.
But you've got 8. You've only got 6 of your games in the division. You've got 8 of your games against these 2 divisions that are arguably the worst 2 in football.
True. But what I'm saying is, look at going 3-3, or one of those teams at least is going to go 2-4 in the division games. And what that means is, theoretically, I would think, if you go 2-4 in those games, then that means that in your other games, you're going to have to go 8-2 to have a really good shot to make the playoffs. Maybe 7-3. But it's hard for me to believe that one second-place team in one of the other divisions isn't going to win 10 games. And I could be wrong, but I just think that whether it's Tampa, whether it's one of the teams in the NFC, in the NFC North, like, Chicago, they go to Atlanta. I mean, would anybody be surprised if the Bears win this game and start 3-0? And what that means, Mike, 3-0 in the conference also. And you and I can argue about Trubisky all day, but it doesn't matter. They're 3-0 with 3 conference wins on September 28th.
Just the fact that we can even have the beginnings of the conversation about the NFC West sending all 4 teams shows how good the NFC West is. One of the teams that may be jostling for wild card position if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wake up is the New Orleans Saints, who need to wake up after what we saw on Monday night in Las Vegas against the Raiders. Peter, we haven't talked about this. One of the popular narratives, though, of the week, Drew Brees is done. It's over. It's finito, as Pat Shurmur said a year or 2 ago. Finito. I don't think it's finito, because I think that Drew Brees is the same guy he's been the last 3 years. I think what's happening is more people are starting to notice it. When the Saints win, you don't notice that Drew Brees can't throw the ball down the field consistently. When they're down in the fourth quarter and they don't have the punch to gain yards in dramatic chunks to try to narrow the deficit because the quarterback can't throw the ball down the field, that's when all of a sudden it becomes a major problem. This is what the Saints have been the past few years. So where do you see this happening? Because I think there's a chance it could go haywire for the Saints on Sunday night against the Packers if the Packers are as good as they seem to be. But I still don't think the Saints are fundamentally lesser or different from what they've been in the past few years.
Yeah, I looked at it a couple of ways, Mike. At the end of the first quarter of this game on Monday, I just thought, oh my God, I'll be, and I'm exhausted Monday night. I'll be able to go to bed at halftime because the Saints are going to kill them. And obviously it didn't happen. But I guess the point I'm making is that I think if you watch the first 3 drives, let's just say, and I'm guessing at that, but you watch the first three or 4 drives for the Saints, and Brees is fine. The offense is fine. But after a while, you start to realize that, hey, Michael Thomas is really good. And remember last year, Mike, we talked about it on this show, that Sean Payton told me the great thing about Michael Thomas is that with him, the 50-50 balls are 70-30 balls. And, in his favor. And all of a sudden, he's not there, and you're asking Traquan Smith and a cast of just guys to be Michael Thomas. Well, I mean, a lot of that is going to go on Drew Brees' shoulders, and to me, unfairly. I'd say let's give Drew Brees more than 2 shaky quarters before we start to put the spades in the ground for him, so to speak.
One thing that's fascinating me about the Saints this year, they signed Taysom Hill to the 2-year, $20 million contract with $16 million guaranteed, and they are using him less than they used him last year. He had 2 runs for 8 yards in week 2. His snaps on offense were down. His special teams plays are dramatically down. Against the Vikings in the playoffs, he was involved in 84% of the special teams plays. On Monday night, he was involved in 19% of the special teams plays. I feel like they are semi-bubble wrapping Taysom Hill, whether as a hedge against Drew Brees getting injured or what, I don't know. But how do you pay the guy that much money and not use him, for crying out loud? He's capable of being the best player on the field.
That's a really good question, Mike. And, I go back to a couple of years ago when on a Saturday night in New Orleans when I was doing a story on the Saints and their multiplicity on offense. And I saw them in a hotel ballroom in a walkthrough on Saturday night. And on one play, basically, they lined up, and until it hit 8 on the play clock, coming down, 10, 9, 8, there was no quarterback on the field. Drew Brees was split left. Taysom Hill was split right. Hill basically then ran behind center, took a snap, and went wide right, trying to, that was going to be the play. He was going to run on this play. So I think that's a long way of saying essentially that Sean Payton will keep his options open, and I believe he will have a role increasingly every week that he'll play more snaps on offense, Taysom Hill. And he'll realize that, especially without Michael Thomas, he needs to use Taysom Hill more, particularly in the roles where he can be a pass catcher.
Absolutely. I was just stunned. No balls thrown his way last week. No passes thrown by Taysom Hill last week either. Let's flip it over to the Packers. The Packers created the impression, based upon their draft strategy, that they were maybe taking a step back and planning for an opportunity to take several steps forward in the future. As it turns out, they're every bit as good as they were last year. Now, it's possible that the Vikings and the Lions are just absolutely horrendous, and the Packers are going to get their welcome to the 2020 season moment on Sunday night. But this Matt LaFleur offense, year 2, Aaron Jones told me after the game on Sunday that the team is definitely better than it was last year because they know the offense. They know the nuances. They know why they call these plays. Aaron Rodgers, more focused because he understands that offense, unlike last year. So, look, that's why I think that there's a chance that this is what we saw Monday night magnified by virtue of the fact that the Packers are a hell of a lot better than the Raiders. That the Packers are going to score and score and score, and can the Saints match them? But I don't see that New Orleans defense being able to take a lot of the steam out of this offense, Peter, because the New Orleans defense wasn't able to take the steam out of the Raiders offense.
I mean, what really has impressed me about the Packers and why I just totally give it up for Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers in particular. Look, everybody on God's green earth says, okay, Packers are going to take a step back. They are not as good as they were last year, blah, 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 blah. They're not going 13-3 again. And right now, Matt LaFleur has coached 20 games in the NFL, including in the playoffs. He's 16-4. And this year so far, the Green Bay Packers have scored 85 points in 2 games and put up over 1,000 yards. And what that says to me, and I'll get to Aaron Rodgers, but what it says to me is that everybody in this organization, Brian Gutekunst, Matt LaFleur, the players on this team, understand that drafting Jordan Love didn't mean that we were now looking at 2023. Drafting Jordan Love was the exact same reason they drafted Aaron Rodgers in 2005. They want a succession plan in place. And as Brian Gutekunst told me on Sunday of draft weekend, because I said to him, you know that Aaron Rodgers, probably is going to take this as supreme motivation. What if he's great the next 3 years? And he goes, well, that's good. And I said, what if you have to trade Jordan Love? He said, well, that's fine. That'd mean we'd get great quarterback play over the next 3 years and into the future. That is why, Mike, everybody dismisses totally the prospect that Jordan Love could be Jimmy Garoppolo too. I don't dismiss it at all. Look at how Aaron Rodgers is playing. And I'll also credit Aaron Rodgers tremendously for coming into camp without this sort of, oh man, I'm angry at the world. He came into camp with being the most the most agreeable guy. Hey, look, we're a great team. We're this. And there was no anger at anybody for drafting Jordan Love instead of a wide receiver in the first round. And so that is why the Packers are where they are. They've gotten buy-in from a guy who you would thought maybe wouldn't buy in, Aaron Rodgers, and he's playing the football as well as he's played in recent years.
It's a means to an end, Peter. There's no way he's forgotten about it. I think he's made the calculation that the best way to deal with it is to be agreeable, even if it is a little passive-aggressive, and to go out and kick ass and take names and win games and win a championship and then hand the trophy to Mark Murphy the way that Paul Crewe handed the football to the warden at the prison and say, stick this in your trophy case, I'm out. Look,
somehow I don't see that happening.
I hope the Packers are great this year and next year, because I do think at some level what the Packers are trying to set up is an opportunity to trade Aaron Rodgers for a king's ransom at a time when they otherwise would want to move on from him anyway. I think that's part of the method to this apparent madness. And I think Mark Murphy, who's gotten a lot more involved in football over the past few years, he liked it last year when the Tyler Dunne story came out, painting a picture of dysfunction between Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers, because maybe it'll get some people riled up. And when people get riled up, good things can happen. The selection of Jordan Love, maybe it gets somebody even more riled up, and maybe some good things happen for the Packers. So we'll see what happens on Sunday night. I think there's a chance, Peter, that this one gets out of hand. I think there's a chance the Packers blow them out. They're going to have 750 fans there. That's not nearly enough to deter Aaron Rodgers. When we saw what he did in Minnesota with no fans there, in a quiet Superdome, oh boy. Again, if it clicks like it has the first 2 weeks, watch out, New Orleans Saints. All right.